So, you want to know about the humans, do you? Corel stood at the podium, all four of his arms crossed in what the younger cadets had learned to recognize as his "you're all idiots" pose. The lecture hall at the Vos Military Academy was packed standing room only, which was ironic considering most of the attendees didn't actually stand the way humans did. Some hovered, some coiled, a few just sort of existed in their seats. Let me guess, Krell continued, his translator unit rendering his clicking mandibles into something these fresh-faced recruits could understand. You've heard the stories, you've seen the propaganda feeds, you think you know what happened during the Terror campaign. A Regellian in the front row, eager as a newly hatched grub, raised one of its sensory stalks. Corel ignored it. You think you're going to sit here, listen to some grizzled old veteran talk about the war, and then you'll head off to the simulation pods feeling all inspired and ready to fight. He paused, letting his secondary eyes sweep across the room, while his primary eyes focused on the Regalian, who was now slowly lowering its stalk. Well, tough luck. I'm not here to inspire you, I'm here to terrify you. There's a difference. The room had gone quiet. Good. Kurel had been doing these lectures for 3 cycles now, ever since the Treaty of New Geneva had been signed, and he'd been politely forcefully retired from active combat duty. The military brass thought he'd be perfect for educational outreach. What they really meant was, Kurel, you've seen too much. Go scare the children so they don't make our mistakes. My name is Commander Kale of the 7th Talon Fleet, retired, thank the stars and the void. He uncrossed his upper arms and gestured at the hollow display behind him. I fought in 17 major engagements against human forces. I survived all of them, which puts me in a very exclusive category. Most officers who went up against the humans, they didn't get to retire. They got to be statistics. Someone in the back, a Zandari, by the sound of the respiratory pattern, made a noise that might have been a scoff. Oh, you think I'm exaggerating? Krell's mandibles curved into what his human colleagues had once told him looked like a smile. It wasn't perfect. That's exactly the attitude that got the vanguard of purity wiped out at the Battle of Europa. Confidence. They were confident too, right up until the humans introduced them to something called a tactical nuke. He tapped the podium with one claw. Settle in, cadets. Class is in session, and trust me, you're going to want to take notes. The intelligence briefings made humans sound like a joke. Honestly, let me paint you a picture, Kural said, activating the hollow display. A three-dimensional rendering of a human appeared, rotating slowly. This is what we were up against. Look at it. No natural armor plating, no venom sacs, no redundant organ systems. They've got 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, and exactly one brain. One. They are so fragile that their own planet's gravity gives them back problems. A few cadets tittered with amusement. Their bite force? Pathetic. Their running speed? I've seen cargo haulers move faster. They can't even regulate their own body temperature properly. They have to wear artificial skins just to survive in climates that differ from their comfort zone by a few degrees. Krell let that sink in. Our xenobiologists concluded that humans were a species that had somehow achieved space travel through sheer dumb luck, probably stolen technology, we figured. He paused, letting his mandibles click together slowly. We were so very catastrophically wrong. The hollow display shifted to show a military file. My first encounter with humans was at the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Small engagement. We had numerical superiority, better weapons, tactical high ground. It was supposed to be a quick strike, secure the resources, Send the humans running back to their little blue marble. Carol's voice dropped. Instead, I met Lieutenant Eva Kowalski. The image changed to show a human female, average height, brown hair tied back, unremarkable by any combat standard. She was a supply officer. Supply. Do you understand? She wasn't even frontline infantry. Her job was to count ration packets and make sure the ammunition got to the right people. Krell's secondary eyes narrowed. When we breached their defensive perimeter, do you know what Lieutenant Eva Kowalski did? Silence. She picked up a plasma cutter, a tool designed for mining operations, and she held a choke point for 47 minutes alone. She was hit 3 times. 3 times. Any one of those shots would have put a Vos warrior into medical stasis. She just, and I quote from her own report, got annoyed about it. Corral pulled up the tactical footage. The cadets watched as the human, clearly bleeding, dragged herself behind cover, sealed her own wounds with industrial adhesive, and then somehow got back up. She killed 6 of my soldiers before we finally brought her down with a stun barrage. And when we checked her vitals, expecting to find a corpse, she was still conscious, still fighting the restraints, still trying to bite through her gag. He shook his head. The medic who examined her found that she'd been fighting with a collapsed lung and enough blood loss to kill most species twice over. The Regilian from earlier raised its stock again. But Commander, surely that was an anomaly, a statistical outlier, yes? That's what I thought too, Kell said. That's what we all thought. Surely we just encountered one particularly unhinged human. One crazy individual who didn't know when to quit. He let the silence stretch. Then we met the rest of them. Turns out, Lieutenant Kowalski wasn't exceptional by human standards. She was average. She got a medal for her actions that day. You know what it was called? A Bronze Star. Bronze. That's the third tier commendation in the human military hierarchy. Third tier. They gave her the participation trophy version of valor because what she did was apparently just another Tuesday for them. Krell's mandibles clicked rapidly, the was equivalent of bitter laughter. That's when I started to realize we hadn't invaded a colony. We'd poked a hornet's nest, and we were about to learn what hornets do when you make them angry. After the Kepler incident, High Command decided we needed better intelligence on human combat psychology. So they assigned me to intelligence analysis, Krell said, pulling up a new series of files. My job was to review combat footage, interrogate prisoners, figure out what made these creatures tick. What I found, cadets, kept me awake for weeks. And I don't even need to sleep as much as humans do. The holo display flickered to dozens of battlefield recordings. Here's what I learned. Humans have this thing, this concept that doesn't translate well into any of our languages. The closest our linguistic computers could get was spite. It's like revenge, but pettier, more personal. It's the willingness to hurt yourself just to make sure your enemy suffers more. A Zantari cadet raised a claw. That's illogical. Self-preservation is the foundation of all combat doctrine. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Krell's laugh was sharp. Let me introduce you to Captain Roland Hayes, and then you can tell me about logic. The display showed a blocky human male, scarred face, cold eyes, that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. Hayes was a frigate captain. We engaged his ship, the Defiant, that's what they named it. Of course they did, near the asteroid belt of some forgettable system. We had 3 cruisers. He had 1 frigate with a damaged engine core and maybe 60% weapons capacity. Krell's claws tapped the podium rhythmically. Standard doctrine says he should have surrendered or retreated. Hayes did neither. The tactical map appeared, showing the battle formation. Instead, he rerouted life support power to weapons, vented half his crew compartments to space for a speed boost, and rammed his ship directly into our flagship. Corell's voice grew quieter. Not to disable it, to detonate his own reactor core inside our shield perimeter. He killed himself and his entire remaining crew just to take out our command vessel. The room was silent, except for the hum of the Hala projectors. We captured his final transmission. You want to know what he said? Krell didn't wait for an answer. If I'm going down, I'm taking you bastards with me. Then he laughed as he steered his ship into a collision that would kill everyone aboard. Krell pulled up medical files next, rows and rows of injury reports. The pattern kept repeating. Humans with broken bones, still fighting. Humans with severed limbs, still fighting. We had one incident where a human soldier lost her arm to shrapnel, picked it up with her remaining hand and beat one of our troopers with it before she passed out from blood loss. He gestured at the files. Their medics started reporting that the biggest problem they had wasn't treating injuries. It was convincing wounded humans to stay down and accept treatment. A cadet near the back made a gurgling sound of disbelief. I know, I know. It sounds like propaganda, like I'm making this up to scare you. I wish I was. Corell's primary eyes dimmed slightly. I started having conversations with human prisoners, trying to understand. One of them, a corporal who'd been fighting for 6 hours with two broken ribs and a concussion, told me something I'll never forget. He paused, remembering. I asked him, why do you keep fighting when you're clearly beaten? You know we have superior numbers, better technology, strategic advantage. Why not surrender and leave? Krell's translator gave his next words a haunting quality. He looked at me like I was the crazy one and said, because you haven't killed me yet, and as long as I'm breathing, I can make your life difficult. It's not about winning, it's about making sure you regret starting this fight in the first place. The holo display switched to a psychological profile chart. Our xenopsychologist came back with a diagnosis. Humans, they concluded, have a species-wide predisposition toward what they clinically termed catastrophic stubbornness, refuse to surrender, refuse to acknowledge impossible odds, refuse to die when any sensible organism would just give up. Krell's mandibles spread wide. They fight out of spite. They fight because they are angry. They fight because surrender feels worse than death. And that, cadets, is absolutely terrifying. He let the words hang in the air. But I still hadn't seen the worst of it yet. That came later, at Station Seret 9. That's where I learned what humans are really capable of when you back them into a corner. Station Xerath 9 was supposed to be our grand victory, the engagement that would break human resistance in the outer colonies. We brought everything, Krilla said, his voice carrying a weight that made several cadets shift uncomfortably. 4 battle carriers, 60 support craft, 15,000 troops. The humans had maybe 3,000 defenders, half of them civilians with basic combat training. The station itself was a glorified research outpost, mostly scientists and engineers. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. The holo display rendered the station a sprawling structure of connected modules orbiting a gas giant. We expected them to evacuate. We gave them 6 hours warning, which was more courtesy than they deserved, honestly. Standard siege protocol. They could leave, we take the station, everyone goes home. Krell's claws drummed faster. Their commanding officer sent back a two-word response. Come take it. A nervous clicking came from somewhere in the audience. So we did. We started with orbital bombardment, softening their defenses, taking out weapon emplacements. Textbook approach. The display showed the tactical progression. Then we sent in the assault teams, breaching pods, shock troops, the works. We figured we'd have the station secured in 4 hours, maybe 6 if they were stubborn about it. Carol's secondary eyes closed briefly. 37 hours later, we were still fighting for every corridor, every room, every storage closet. The humans had turned the entire station into a death trap. They'd rigged the environmental systems to vent atmosphere randomly. They'd booby-trapped the elevators. They'd even weaponized the cafeteria by putting something called ghost peppers in the ventilation system, which our troops found out the hard way is basically chemical warfare. A few cadets made sounds that might have been laughter, but it died quickly when they saw Quirrell's expression. But the thing that changed everything, the moment I knew we were fighting something we didn't understand, happened in Medical Bay 7. His voice dropped. We'd pushed deep into the station, taken significant casualties, but we were winning. My unit reached the medical bay, expecting to find wounded humans, maybe some staff. Easy capture, use them for leverage. The display showed a floor plan of the medical bay. Instead, we found Sergeant Felix Ortega. He was a medic, trained to save lives, not take them. He'd been treating wounded for 36 straight hours. No sleep, barely any food. His hands were shaking from exhaustion. Carroll paused. He'd also barricaded himself in with 42 wounded soldiers and civilians who couldn't be evacuated. The tactical recording began to play, grainy footage from a helmet camera. We told him to surrender. We had him surrendered. 12 armed soldiers against one exhausted medic, and a room full of people who could barely stand. He looked at us, and I swear by the void, he smiled. Carroll's mandibles clicked rapidly. Then he said, and I quote, over my dead body, which, fair warning, is going to be really inconvenient for everyone involved. The cadets watched as the human medic picked up a weapon. He'd set up a defensive position using medical equipment, gurneys for cover, surgical lasers rewired as weapons, medication carts positioned to create choke points. And then this exhausted, shaking human who'd spent a day and a half saving lives proceeded to hold off my entire squad for 43 minutes. The footage showed the firefight chaotic and brutal. He got hit multiple times, kept fighting, ran out of ammunition for his rifle, switched to a pistol, ran out of ammunition for that, started throwing medical supplies. We hit him with a stun round that should have dropped him instantly. He staggered, went down on one knee, and then got back up, got back up. Kural's voice cracked slightly, a sound the translator rendered as static. One of my soldiers finally asked him, why are you doing this? You're a medic. This isn't even your job. You could surrender. We treat you as a non-combatant under Galactic Convention. The halo display froze on Ortega's face, bloody, exhausted, defiant. He said, these are my people, my patients. You want them. You go through me first. That's the job. The recording continued, showing Ortega's last stand. We brought him down with massed fire, finally checked his vitals. He'd been fighting with 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe blood loss, and enough painkillers in his system to kill a boss warrior 3 times over. The chemicals he'd injected himself with were keeping him conscious past the point where his body should have shut down. Keller's voice was almost a whisper now. And you know what the worst part was? Silence. Every single one of those wounded he was protecting survived while we were fighting him. They'd been evacuating through maintenance tunnels he'd kept secret. He knew he was going to die. He knew it from the start. The whole thing was a diversion, and he sacrificed himself to buy them time. The display showed the empty medical bay, the wounded already gone. That's when I felt it for the first time. Cadets, real fear, not fear of dying, fear of what we'd started, fear of a species that produces people like Felix Ortega as a matter of routine. He got a medal too, posthumously, the Medal of Honor, their highest award. Know what the citation said? Cadell pulled up the text. Above and beyond the call of duty, like there's a normal level of duty, and then there's whatever this insanity was. He deactivated the display. We took stations at it 9 eventually. It cost us 8,000 troops and 19 days for a research outpost. And I still hadn't learned the most terrifying lesson about humans. That came when I finally understood what they were actually fighting for. The breakthrough in understanding humans came from the most unlikely source, their own historical records. After Zerid 9, I became obsessed, Krell admitted, gesturing to pull up a new series of files. I started studying human history, their wars, their conflicts, thousands of years of them killing each other before they ever met us. I thought maybe I could find a pattern, a weakness, something we could exploit. The display cycled through images of ancient human battles, medieval sieges, modern warfare. What I found instead was a consistent, horrifying theme. Humans don't fight wars the way we do. We fight to win territory, resources, strategic advantage. We fight until the cost benefit analysis says stop. His claws tapped an agitated rhythm. Humans fight to make you regret ever picking a fight in the first place. They have a saying, Pyrrhic victory. It means winning, but at such devastating cost that you might as well have lost. They invented a term for winning too expensively. Think about that. A Voss cadet in the third row spoke up. But Commander, that's irrational. Wars are about objectives, measurable goals. You'd think so, Krell said. Then I met Commander Victoria Cross, and she taught me exactly how wrong I was about human objectives. The holo display showed a human woman, middle-aged by their standards, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen the heat death of the universe and found it mildly interesting. Cross was in charge of defensive operations in the Tau City system. We had her outgunned, outmanned, and completely surrounded. I was part of the negotiation team sent to discuss terms of surrender. Kala's mandibles spread in what wasn't quite a smile. She sat across from us, calm as deep space, and listened to our very reasonable offer. Surrender the system, minimal casualties, her people would be treated well under occupation law. The recording of the meeting played audio only. She thanked us for our generous offer. Very polite. Then she said, I have a counter proposal. You leave now, go back to your fleet, and tell your superiors that Tau City is not worth what it's going to cost you. Krull shook his head. Our lead negotiator laughed, asked her what exactly she thought she could do against our superior forces. Her response is burned into my memory forever. He played the audio clip. I can't beat you. Commander Cross's voice was steady, conversational. I know that. You know that. But here's what I can do. I can make taking this system so expensive, so bloody, so absolutely devastating to your forces that you spend the next decade recovering. I've got 4,000 troops who all volunteered for last stand duty. Do you know what that means? It means they're not planning to survive this. It means they're going to make you pay for every meter of ground in blood and time and resources you can't afford to lose. So ask yourself, is Tau Ceti really worth it? The negotiator had called her bluff, of course. The battle for Tau City lasted 11 weeks. Corel continued. We lost 2 carriers, 43 support craft, and over 12,000 troops. The humans lost everything. Everyone. Cross herself died in the final bombardment of the command center, still coordinating resistance until the last second. His voice carried a strange mixture of respect and horror. And the worst part, she was right. The losses were so severe that High Command had to pull back from 3 other systems just to recover. We won the battle and lost the strategic position. Pyrrhic victory. The display shifted to tactical analysis, casualty reports, resource expenditure calculations. That's when I finally understood. Humans aren't trying to win. They're trying to make losing too expensive for you to continue. Every last stand, every suicide mission, every time they fight past the point of reason, they are running up your bill. It's economic warfare dressed up as military operations. Krell pulled up a particularly disturbing file. And then there's the other thing Cross taught us, chemical warfare. The cadets stirred uneasily. Not in the traditional sense. Humans regulate that among themselves, mostly. No, I'm talking about their biology. Cross had her troops stop using standard rations 3 weeks before we arrived. Know what they ate instead? Something called suicide wings, extra spicy curry, ghost pepper, everything. Foods that made their bodies produce capsaicin derivatives in their sweat. Our Italian cadet made a confused gesture. When we started taking hand-to-hand casualties, our medics couldn't figure out why troops were having respiratory failures. Turns out human sweat was toxic to us. Not lethal, but incapacitating. They'd weaponized their own biochemistry by changing their diet. Corell's laugh was bitter. Cross had left instructions about it in her personal logs. She'd calculated the effect, tested it, and implemented it as standard protocol. Just another Tuesday in human tactical planning. The holo display showed medical reports, biochemical analyses, terrified notes from those field medics. They didn't just fight with weapons, they fought with their bodies, their psychology, their absolute refusal to make anything easy for us. And I still hadn't learned the final lesson, the one that ended the war, that came during the treaty negotiations, when I finally understood what humans had been holding back the entire time. The treaty negotiations happened on neutral ground, a diplomatic station in unclaimed space. By this point, both sides were exhausted, Kerr said, his voice carrying the weight of those memories. We'd been fighting for 3 years. We'd won more battles than we'd lost, held more territory, had better strategic positioning. On paper, we were winning the war. The holo display showed casualty charts, resource depletion graphs, fleet strength comparisons. But our analysts started running projections. If the war continued at current intensity, we'd achieve total victory over human space in approximately 40 years. 40 years of bleeding resources, losing soldiers, fighting for every single centimeter of space. The economic models showed our civilization collapsing under the strain long before we'd ever see that victory. The Huel's claws clicked together slowly. The humans, meanwhile, would be extinct. They'd lose, but they'd make sure we lost too. Mutual destruction dressed up as a war. He paused, letting that sink in. So we sued for peace. Both sides agreed to negotiations. That's where I met Corporal James Brixton. The display showed a young human male, unremarkable, the kind of soldier you'd pass in a hallway, and forget immediately. He was part of the human security detail at the negotiations, just a regular infantryman, nothing special. We got to talking during one of the breaks, and I asked him the question that had been eating at me for 3 years. Quayle's secondary eyes focused on a point in the distance, remembering. I said, James, why do your people fight like this? You know you can't win. You've known it from the start. Why not surrender? Preserve your species. Live under occupation until you can negotiate better terms. It's logical. It's rational. Why choose extinction over submission? The room was absolutely silent. He looked at me with those two eyes, those fragile human eyes, and he said something I'll never forget as long as I live. Carroll's translator gave his words a haunted quality. He said, Commander Krell, we've been studying your species too. We know about your history, your wars, your culture. You fight for logical reasons. Territory, resources, survival. You can be reasoned with, negotiated with, because you understand cost-benefit analysis. The hollow display showed nothing now, just Kel standing alone at the podium. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. He said, But here's the thing you need to understand about humans. We've fought wars on our own planet for reasons you'd consider insane. Religion, pride, revenge. We've burned entire continents over insults. We've killed millions over whose imaginary friend was better. We've gone to war because someone shot one guy in a place most people couldn't find on a map. Krell's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He told me, You think you're fighting us at full intensity. You think what you've seen is humans at war. Commander, we've been holding back the entire time. Every battle, every engagement, we've been fighting under rules of engagement that limit what weapons we use, how we conduct operations, what we are allowed to do to enemy combatants. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. I asked him what he meant. He pulled out a data pad and showed me human military history, something called the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Regulations, rules they made for themselves about how to conduct warfare. And then he showed me their weapon stockpiles, the things they hadn't used against us. Quell activated display again, showing weapon specifications that made several cadets recoil. Biological weapons that could sterilize entire planets, nanomachine swarms that could disassemble matter at the molecular level, artificial intelligence warfare systems they'd banned themselves from using because they were too effective, psychological warfare techniques that could break sapient minds, and worst of all, he showed me their nuclear arsenals. A Zentari cadet interrupted. But they use nuclear weapons against us. Captain Hayes, you said. Tactical nukes. Small yield. Localized damage. What Hayes used was a firecracker compared to what they had stockpiled. Cattle's mandibles trembled. James showed me specifications for weapons that could crack planets. Literally, break worlds apart. They'd had these weapons for centuries and never used them on each other, not even during their worst conflicts, because they'd agreed it was too far. He let that information settle over the room like a shroud. Then Corporal James Brixton said the words that ended the war. He said, We're fighting you with one hand tied behind our backs, Commander, because we're trying to leave you alive. We're trying to find a way for both our species to survive this. But if you push us to the point where extinction is inevitable anyway, we'll untie that hand. And then you'll find out what humans are really capable of when we stop playing nice. Castle's laugh was hollow. The treaty was signed within a week. High Command took one look at what humans had been restraining themselves from using and decided that winning wasn't worth finding out if Brixton was bluffing. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. Humans don't bluff. They promise. Coral deactivated the holo display and looked out over the sea of young, uncertain faces staring back at him. So, cadets, let me give you the advice that High Command wishes someone had given them before we started this whole mess. He uncrossed all four arms and leaned forward on the podium. If you ever, and I mean ever, find yourself in a position where conflict with humans seems inevitable, here's what you do. You sit down, you negotiate, you compromise, you give them whatever they are asking for within reason, and then you give them a little bit more just to be safe. A brave Wasp cadet raised a claw. But Commander, that sounds like cowardice. No, Krell said sharply. That's survival. There's a difference. Cowardice is running from a fight you could win. Wisdom is avoiding a fight that will destroy you even if you win it. His mandibles clicked slowly. Humans are currently our allies. We trade with them. We share technology. We cooperate on scientific endeavors. And every single day I'm grateful for that, because the alternative is continuing a war we could never truly win. He gestured to the empty hollow display space. The real reason to fear humans isn't their weapons. It isn't their tactics. It isn't even their refusal to quit when any sane species would surrender. Kel's voice carried across the lecture hall with absolute certainty. The real reason to fear humans is that they are capable of all the horrors I've described, all the violence, all the spite-driven insanity, and they choose not to use it most of the time. They restrain themselves. They follow rules they made up. They try diplomacy first. His secondary eyes swept the room one final time. But if you push them past that restraint, if you make them decide that rules don't matter anymore, you'll find out why Earth is the only planet in their system with exactly one sapient species left on it. All their competing cousins, all the other intelligent species that evolved alongside them, every single one extinct. And humans were the only ones left standing. Coral straightened up, all four arms moving to clasp behind his back in formal dismissal posture. So here's my final piece of advice, fresh from someone who learned it the hard way. The human problem isn't a problem you solve with military force. It's a problem you solve by making absolutely certain it never becomes a problem in the first place. Make friends with humans, or live with them. Trade with them, marry them if your biology allows it, I don't care. Just don't fight them. Not unless you're prepared to pay a price that makes victory meaningless. He clicked his mandibles one last time. They sound sharp in the silent room. Class dismissed. Try not to start any wars on your way out. Trust me, the paperwork is a nightmare, and that's assuming you live long enough to file it. As the cadets filed out, muttering amongst themselves, looking far less confident than when they'd arrived, Cadell allowed himself a moment of dark satisfaction. Another batch properly terrified. Another group who might, just might, be smart enough to learn from his mistakes instead of making their own. The Regalian from the front row paused at the door, sensory stock turning back toward him. Commander, do you think we'll ever fight the humans again? Cavil considered the question carefully. Not if we're smart, he said finally, and not if they're merciful. Those are the only two scenarios where the galaxy survives the experience. The cadet left, and Kell was alone with his memories, his scars, and the crystal clear recollection of Corporal James Brixton's smile when he'd explained what humans had been holding back. Some nightmares Quell had learned were educational. This was one of them.